Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're not just explaining a concept, we're opening up a cold case file, a postmortem on a project that went disastrously wrong. So put on your detective hats, because we're about to piece together the clues to solve a very, very expensive mystery.
So, here's the crime scene. Let's call it Project Titan. It was supposed to be a huge strategic win. Millions of dollars were poured into it. And the result? A total catastrophe. It was late, it was way over budget, and the thing it produced was, well, completely useless. So the central question for our investigation is pretty simple. Who's responsible for this mess?
Every good investigation has to start with a lineup of the usual suspects. And in the world of project management, that lineup is what we call the governance structure. We got to figure out who these players are and, more importantly, what they were supposed to be doing.
And here they are, our 4 primary suspects. First up, you've got the project sponsor, the one who supposedly owns the whole business case. Then there's the project board, who are there for oversight. You've got the project manager, the one in the trenches running things day to day. And finally, the assurance team, who's supposed to be checking the work. On paper, it looks perfect, right? A system of checks and balances. But somewhere, this whole system just completely fell apart.
Now, before we dig into the evidence, we need to understand the jurisdiction here. There's corporate governance, which operates at a really high level. It asks the big question, are we even working on the right things as a company? And then you have project governance, which takes that big strategy and asks, okay, for this specific project, are we doing it the right way to get the job done? It's that vital link between the big vision in the boardroom and the actual work on the ground.
All right, we've got our suspects, we understand the law of the land, now it's time to get our hands dirty. Let's examine the evidence from the Project Titan crime scene and see what clues it gives us about where it all went so wrong.
Okay, our first piece of evidence is a textbook case of what we call scope creep. Imagine you start out building a simple website, but then someone wants to add a login, then an online store, then a video streaming service. That's what happened here. New features and new requests were constantly being bolted on. The finish line just kept moving further and further away, and the budget was exploding with every single new idea.
Now, here's the thing. Any well-run project has a defense against this, like a bouncer at the door of a nightclub. It's called the change control process. It's a formal system that's supposed to stop and check every single change. It asks, what's this going to cost? How much time will it add? Is it even worth it? No change gets in without the right person signing off on it.
And this brings us to our first real puzzle. The defense mechanism was there, but the changes just stormed right past it. The bouncer was clearly asleep on the job. So the question is, who was supposed to be guarding that gate? Who had the authority and the responsibility to say no?
Let's move on to the second clue, and this one is a biggie. Warning lights were flashing red all over the dashboard. The reports were clear. Project Titan was a runaway train careening off the tracks. It was obvious it wasn't going to deliver the value it promised. And yet, someone kept shoveling money into the engine. It was a classic case of throwing good money after bad.
And just like with the scope creep, there's a safety system designed to prevent this exact disaster. They're called stage gates. Think of them like giant emergency brakes or "Are you sure you want to continue" buttons. They're formal checkpoints where the people in charge are forced to stop, look at the evidence, and ask, is this project still worth it? It's their chance to pull the plug before another dollar is wasted.
Okay, the evidence is really piling up now. The security system failed and the emergency brake was never pulled. This wasn't just a simple mistake by one person. No way! This points to a massive, systemic failure, and it smells like it goes right to the very top. To crack this case, we have to follow the chain of command, right to the person with the ultimate accountability.
This timeline shows us exactly what the project sponsor is supposed to do. They own the business case from day one, they chair the board, but look right there in the middle. Decision Gates revalidates the business case. That was their moment. That was their job. And on Project Titan, it just didn't happen. The sponsor never stepped up and asked the tough question, should we actually stop this thing?
And this, right here, this is the smoking gun. See, the project manager is accountable for delivering the output, building the thing. But the sponsor, they are the single point of accountability for the outcome, the actual value that the project was supposed to create in the first place. This is where the buck stops, period.
So the mystery is solved. The sponsor completely failed to protect the business case. The project board, who were supposed to be the guardians of value, they failed too. And the project manager, they were powerless. They couldn't stop this runaway train without backing from the top.
The real culprit wasn't just one person. It was a total, catastrophic collapse of the governance framework. The system itself was the villain.
Okay, so we've cracked the case, but solving the mystery is really only half the battle. The big question now is, how do we prevent the next Project Titan? How do we build an airtight system where this kind of disaster is, well, basically impossible? Let's lay out the blueprint.
It really comes down to 4 golden rules. First, you have to demand accurate, honest data. You can't make good decisions with bad information. Second, your controls have to match the risk. A $1 billion project needs a lot more scrutiny than a $10,000 one. Third, you have to insist on seeing problems early, using things like stage gates so you can catch fires when they're small. And finally, you absolutely need clear paths for escalating problems so they get to the right people fast.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Now that you've seen how an entire system can fail, and more importantly, how you can fix it, what are you going to do? When you see those first warning signs on your own project, the little bit of scope creep, the whispers that the business case is shaky, what's your first move? Because in the end, you're not just a controller or a manager, you're a guardian of value, and that's a pretty big deal.